Normally I'll only do a wrestling themed video on the weekend of WrestleMania, but since this year marks the 30th anniversary of the Royal Rumble event, I figured why not take a look at a pair of games that bear the title of Royal Rumble. Royal Rumble is, of course, WWF or WWE's annual January show headlining with a big battle royal, and this year they're actually doing two, one for the men, one for the women's divisions. In 1993, under the Flying Edge and LJN banners, Acclaim published a pair of the games sharing their name with the event for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo respectively. The only major differences between the games were the roster and of course the hardware they were on. 7 of the 12 available wrestlers were available to play on both consoles and the other 5 were unique. One interesting piece of trivia is that the Super Nintendo version was the first WWF console video game that didn't include Hulk Hogan, quite possibly even the first of any WWF game. The game is a follow-up to the prior year's Super WrestleMania title, which also appeared on the Super Nintendo and Genesis. Royal Rumble is a noticeable upgrade to its predecessor on all counts. Better graphics, better sound, better play control, larger rosters, more variety of wrestling moves, and of course, more game types as well. The 6-button controller wasn't available for the Genesis when the Super WrestleMania came out, so that also made a huge gameplay upgrade for Royal Rumble on the Genesis. Each wrestler has the same basic attacks, common wrestling moves including the vertical suplex and body slam and others. The only unique thing to each wrestler is their signature or finishing maneuvers, and that's fairly typical of a number of wrestling games from this era, not just WWF titles. The different gameplay modes are identical between the two games. Single matches, 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 tag matches, and of course the Royal Rumble. The Rumble match in this game doesn't follow the traditional rules. They just fill the ring up with 6 wrestlers and add new ones as each are eliminated, and that will continue until all 12 on the roster have made appearances. Players always start first in the Rumble in this game, and there's also brawl matches, which are no ref, no rules affairs, where all you have to do is be the first to reduce your opponent's health to win. This game, like many other wrestling games of the time, feature a tug-of-war type grappling system in order to pull off slams and other moves. You basically have to mash the buttons continuously in order to win the grapples. Compared to wrestling video games of more recent times, this feels really primitive, and if you want to play this game without wearing out your fingers or your controllers, a turbo controller is a definite must. As for which version is better, it's a little easier to mash the buttons on a 6-button Genesis controller than a standard Super Nintendo controller with shoulder buttons, so that makes a bit of a difference. Aside from that, I really haven't noticed any major differences in the responsiveness of the controls or anything quite like that. Visually, the games are both decent, but there really isn't any variety of the wrestlers' body types. You can still tell each character apart by their attire and their heads, and the Super Nintendo version includes Yokozuna, who was billed at over 500 pounds. But they really didn't give him that much of a larger body type. The proportions just really aren't there. The arena that the games take place in is meant to look like a 16-bit version of the WWF TV shows at the time, and it does a somewhat passable job. The two games look mostly the same, but the Super Nintendo version does have a bit of an edge with a cleaner look and more on-screen colors. One of my favorite features of WWF video games from the 8 and 16-bit eras was hearing arrangements of the wrestlers' theme songs. Both games do a pretty good job with this, and as for which one does the better job, I think that is highly subjective. I've always felt that the more rock-based sounds were better on the Sega Genesis. For example, Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart's theme songs here, and something like Macho Man Randy Savage's would sound way better on the Super Nintendo. Two characters unique to the Super Nintendo version, Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect, both have orchestral themes that really benefit from the sound chip of the Super Nintendo version. All in all, deciding on which of these two games is better, it's kind of subjective. It really boils down to which roster do you like better, which console do you like better, and personally, I kind of have to pick the Genesis one, not on the roster or anything like that. More just, this is the one that I played first. Might sound funny, I know a lot of people picked up that Genesis 6-button controller for Street Fighter 2. I bought it for Royal Rumble, believe it or not. If you're looking for a recommendation for either of these, I really just can't give it because they did not age all that great. That button mashing tug-of-war grappling system just is not all that fun. And if you're looking for good wrestling games, you're better off waiting till the next console generation and the 16-bit, if you ask me. These, probably at best, only good in short doses. Hope you've enjoyed the review. Made it this far, thank you for sticking around, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe. I do new videos at least once a week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.